The topic is mobbing the mob when workplace dynamics promote mobbing power. And I'm Jocelynne Scutt, a barrister and human rights lawyer, and also I've got adjunct professorship at the University of New South Wales. Right. Now. 1 minute. Oh, sorry. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Good. I want to look at or question the workplace dynamics within the police, within government and within the media that led to this situation in the United Kingdom where the mob was the victim of mobbing by these three institutions, the police, the media and government. On the 15th of April 1989, the Hillsborough tragedy occurred. What happened was that people were attending a football match in the Hillsborough Stadium, and as a consequence of what happened there, people died and people were seriously injured. What then happened was that there was vilification of the Liverpool fans. It was the Liverpool stand, there was the Liverpool stand and there was the other stand for the other group that was the other football team. What happened was that the Liverpool fans, who were the ones who were the mob, who were mobbed, were vilified. The police said that they had actually broken into the gate by which that led them into the stand where they were killed and injured. They said that they were drunk and disorderly. They said that they were football hooligans. They said that they had trampled on their fellow fans. They said they'd robbed their fellow fans, and the police also said that what had happened was that they had actually come in without tickets, and so therefore they were being dishonest in that way. These are the people who were killed. The police the police put the blame on the Liverpool fans, and they alleged, as I said, they were drunk and disorderly, and it was the police commander who was actually in command of the football match and of giving directions as to where the fans should go and what should happen to ensure that it operated in an orderly manner. He was the one, Duckenfield, who actually gave the permission for the fans to come in at that gate. But he was the one who said that they had broken in and that they were not there legitimately. He said, oh, it's probably better if I look here. Sorry, I'll get the... It's the way the light's reflecting. Yeah. And in 1990, there was an inquest into the deaths. And what happened at the inquest was that there was insufficient evidence to bring any charges, although there had been all these allegations of theft and so forth. And there was also the question as to the role that the police played. But there was no evidence on which anybody could be charged. Then in 1991, the coroner's report said that everybody who died was beyond saving at 3:15 p.m. when the first ambulance arrived. And that blocked investigations into the rescue efforts. What happened was that all the ambulances were ordered to stay in a particular place that was distant from where the people had been injured, and the ambulance workers had to make their way to where where the people were injured, and then take them back to the ambulances that had all the equipment. And the deaths were ruled accidental. Then there was the Taylor report in 1990, and what that report said, it was actually led by a lawyer, a former barrister. He said that policing had broken down, and that was the main reason for the disaster, that the police control meant that there was no provision for actually controlling the spectators at the turnstile. He also found that the semi-finals earlier in 87 and 88, the way that the football stands were operated at that time and the policing had been deficient back at that time, and therefore his report was saying that action should have been taken ahead of the game to improve conditions. And there were various other determinations that he made that opening that gate was crucial to what happened, and that the order that the gate be opened was done in a wrong manner. Now, the terms of reference for this independent inquiry that was held in 2012, this is years after, were that the inquiry should oversee full public disclosure of relevant government and local information and the disclosure protocols about what was being said about the Liverpool fans and about this whole disaster. They had to consult the Hillsborough families to find out what they knew and what their feelings and responses were, had to manage the process of public disclosure as to what actually went on and what happened and who was saying what, particularly those who were in positions of power. And it was also determined that there should be established practices, work, and the keeper of the public records should actually be keeping the Hillsborough documentation so that everyone would have a permanent and clear and accurate record of what had happened. Well, when this report came out, the Taylor report, what was disclosed was that the police were actually at the centre of what had happened in terms of the people being killed and the people being injured. But it was the notion that they had been to blame was false. And what you can see here is when they were, what happened is the mob came in and they were squashed up against the stand, and everybody in the stand above was trying to rescue them, pull them up. And yet the unlawful killing of those individuals who were killed during this event had never been acknowledged until this Taylor report acknowledged it. What I wanted to actually say was this led to a second inquest, and then the second inquest was more truthful. But the point of this presentation is that you had three bodies, as I said, involved in this and in leading the attack on the mob. It was the police, by the untruths that they told about what had happened. It was the media, by the lies that they told also. Here you see you've got the truth. Some fans picked the pockets of the victims. Some fans urinated on the brave cops. Some fans beat up police constables giving the kiss of life. And they were the principal media component that led this attack against the mob. And here you have images that show clearly that the police were there on the spot. The police were there observing what had actually happened, and yet they picked up what the media was there seeing what happened. You can see the media there with their cameras. And they knew what happened, and yet they picked up the story that the police were putting forward, which was false, and they compounded the issue. You then come to the government, and it was the government of Margaret Thatcher. And Margaret Thatcher and her Home Secretary went immediately the next day to look at what had happened and did express sympathy. But the government adopted the police story about what had happened. So you had this triumvirate of the police, the media and the government putting forward the same story, that it was the mob that was at fault, rather than recognising that it was the police that were at fault and that the police were influencing the media in terms of what the media was saying, and then they influenced the government. And when the Taylor report came out, it was looked at first by the Home Office Secretary and by Margaret Thatcher as the Prime Minister, and the Home Office Secretary wanted the Chief Constable to be removed, to make him resign. And Margaret Thatcher said, no, we can't do that, and toned down the Taylor report in terms of what was then projected out to the public and to the media. So she actually compounded the problem by going along with what the police story was, in the sense that once there was criticism of the police, rather than accepting that the police were at fault, she actually added to the downgrading of recognition of the police untruths by distorting what that report had said. Now, government, therefore, what I want to say, in terms of this issue about mobbing the mob, what we have to look at is what is the dynamic of the workplace of police, what is the dynamic of the workplace of the media, and what is the dynamic of the workplace of government that led those three institutions to pick up on this false story about the Liverpudlians and about how it was their fault that damage had happened. It was their fault that people had died. It was their fault that people had injured. And I came across this book by Gustave Le Bon, The Crowd, The Study of the Popular Mind, published in 1895. And it actually is quite interesting to see what he says and to reflect on what he's saying in terms of looking at the crowd component of the way that the police operated, the way that the government operated, and the way that the media operated in vilifying the mob, vilifying the Liverpudlian fans. I wanted to bring in here just two examples where this has happened in the past. People won't know this, but something's happened here. There's the case of the Irish IRA bombings in the United Kingdom, in England. And what happened in that case was, you see, there was discrimination in England against the Irish, and there would be signs up at places that were allowing at tenancy, no blacks, no dogs, and no Irish allowed. And I was talking to somebody this morning whose father came from Ireland, and he said that his father had difficulty getting jobs in England, and that fits with this idea. And with the second example I wanted to give you was Children Overboard, which happened in Australia, where the notion was that one of the boats that was coming in to bring asylum seekers, the people had thrown their children overboard so that they would all be rescued by the military that was out there in the ocean at the time, and therefore would be brought into Australia, and somehow the idea was that they were doing it so that they would gain advantage. Now, in the case of the Irish, what happened with that was that there were people who were prosecuted for bombings of pubs and so on. They were falsely prosecuted, they were falsely convicted, and they were falsely imprisoned. And the media promoted that notion as well, and the government went along with it, and so did the courts. And Lord Denning, some of you will have heard of Lord Denning. He was looked upon as if he was the great jurist. The problem with Lord Denning is that when the case of the IRA came before him, there was an effort to take civil action against the police for their false evidence that they had presented in some of these cases, and also in one of the cases they withheld evidence that was exculpatory of the people that were being prosecuted. And Lord Denning said we could not possibly allow this civil action to go against the police because it would bring the police into disrepute, and we cannot have that. So the point that I'm making here is that you've got then the courts effectively collaborating with the police because they see the police as important and they see the Irish as not important. So even though they were imprisoned falsely and eventually their convictions were overturned, Lord Denning stood in the way at that time. The police, although there is fragmentation of the so-called monolithic police culture, historically consistent features of the occupational culture of police exist. I want to look at, as I said, what it was that operates within the police working experience that leads them to collectively operate in this way, to go along with what they knew were lies. Now, what's interesting about Hillsborough is that the police union initially objected to what the police at the top were saying and said that what the police were saying at the top was untrue. And there's one report that I found that said that, and then they were quickly shut up. And then the union actually ended up supporting the police at the top in the lies that have been told. And it's quite interesting to me that you had the union initially coming out and yet then it went along with what was being said. And when you look at the media, a crowd thinks in images. This is an extract from Le Bon. And the image itself calls up a series of other images having no logical connection with the first. And if you go back to the images I had of the media who were actually there and who were taking pictures of what was actually happening, the fact that they had the images of reality in front of them, and then they had the police saying something completely different, the media published what the police were saying and actually undercut their own knowledge that they had in the images that they had taken. And then we come to government. The first suggestion formulated implants itself immediately by a process of contagion in the brains of all assembled, and the identical bent of the sentiments of a crowd is immediately accomplished. This is again Gustave Le Bon. And if you look at what happened with government, Margaret Thatcher, you see, was opposed to unions, and therefore when the union said this was not the police, she was certainly, it was the police that were at fault. She was certainly not going to listen to what the unions were saying. And who she listened to primarily were the police. And because she was law and order was her approach to life, and also because Liverpool, from a class point of view, is way down there, and Margaret Thatcher wanted to promote an upper level class position or perspective, she was not going to go along with the truth. She went along with what the police said. And this is what I think applicable to government. The first suggestion formulated what the police said, they're drunken louts. They were pickpocketing the dead in front of them. They were trampling all over them. Immediately implants itself by a process of contagion in the brains of all assembled, and the identical bent of the sentiments of the crowd is immediately accomplished. So here we have the images of the truth, and the man there with 96 on his back saying, we're not going to forget. But in the end, you know, you can actually, it is possible to win. And I'll say this to everybody in the room. what's been achieved by Hillsborough is that there is now a new law that the government has put through, and it includes the duty of candor. If people in public positions of power, like the police, tell lies, as was done in the Hillsborough tragedy, then they can be prosecuted, they can be fined, and they can be imprisoned for the lies that they've told. And I want to come back to Tamara's story, because this, I think, resonates in so many ways, because she was attacked by the media too. So it was not only the mobbing within her organisation that she was suffering mobbing from the media and possibly from government. Yes, and the final point I do want to make arising from Tamara's story, what struck me was that Tamara said that she didn't actually know why they'd put her into the position, because here she was, a person of minority ethnic background, but the reason she was put into the position was exactly for that, and it was for her qualifications and her qualities. But what happens is government will appoint you and they think you're wonderful, and it's genuine that they thought you were wonderful, but they do not think that you're actually going to do what is they should anticipate you would do, that is, do the job properly because of your qualifications and because of the qualities that you